Welcome to the first morning of Iowa Ideas. This session that you probably know that you're in right now is Aging Infrastructure in Smaller Communities. The description for that session, in case you don't know or don't have it in front of you, is what can be done to preserve and protect the physical elements of a small community. We'll look at unfunded projects, what factors are delaying or preventing action, and how communities are getting creative to move projects forward. So with us, we have three panelists today that I'm excited to chat with about this topic. We have LD Miller, the mayor of the city of Ely, and he has a lot going on this week surrounding infrastructure projects, which I'm sure he'll get into. We have Theresa Greenfield, the Iowa State Director for USDA. We have Alicia Vasto, Water Program Manager for the Iowa Environmental Council. First of all, thank you all for taking the time to be here this morning as well. I know you all three have very busy schedules in your roles, and just really appreciate you being here. My first question for each of you is just to introduce yourselves a little bit more, what you do in your role, of course, your experience in Iowa, and maybe not your day-to-day, but maybe what your week-to-week looks like and how it relates to the topic that we're talking about today. First one on my screen is Alicia. I'm just going left to right. So Alicia, if you want to go first, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Alicia Vasto. I'm the Water Program Director of the Iowa Environmental Council. I'm coming up on 4 years with the council. Prior to that, I have degrees in environmental science and environmental management, and previously worked for an environmental education organization. In my role currently with the council, we work on law and policy issues related to the environment, so land, water, climate, and energy. And so our work in the water program really focuses on mitigating agricultural pollution, protecting drinking water sources and recreational water for outdoor recreation and quality of life benefits, and increasing resiliency on our landscape. And so we do that through community outreach and education, and also through advocacy, trying to implement science-based policies that will ensure that communities have access to safe drinking water and are protected against the worst outcomes of climate change.
LD, you're next.
Yeah, LD Miller. I am in my second term as mayor of Ely, 7th year here. We are, if those who are not familiar with the city of Ely, we're located in the what's called the corridor between Iowa City and Cedar Rapids. We're actually about 2 miles south of Cedar Rapids. And we've been dealing a lot with aging infrastructure because our town has been growing rapidly since the 90s. And we've been forced to address these issues and work through the challenges of funding and prioritizing and just informing the public of the need of aging infrastructure and the improvements to it. So,
and last but not least, Theresa Greenfield.
Thanks, Gage. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Theresa Greenfield. I am the State Director for USDA Rural Development. President Biden appointed me to this position, and I started almost a year ago, not quite a year ago. My background I've spent most of my career working in community planning, economic development, both in townships and large communities, housing, home building, and commercial real estate development. And so I'm thrilled to be at USDA, where what we do in rural development is we invest with loans, grants, and loan guarantees in rural communities, and only rural communities. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today regarding infrastructure, and thanks for the opportunity to join you.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you all for being here. My first question for you, you all come from various perspectives on this topic, given your roles and working in different areas of infrastructure. But my first question for you, just to kind of set up the rest of this conversation, is how does each of you define infrastructure? I think a lot of us see infrastructure, obviously, the first one people probably think of when they think of infrastructure in their community are the roads. But, you know, in conversations and coverage over my career so far, talking about infrastructure, it kind of encompasses more than just your roads or your sewer and water. I'm wondering for each of you, you know, what all encompasses a community's infrastructure. And anyone can take this one first if they would like.
Well, I'll start from the micro version because it's small towns. You have a harder time with bigger focus, and I always label infrastructure as needs versus wants. Infrastructure is needs. Toilets have to flush. The water has to turn on. The road can't have a gigantic pothole in the middle of it. Those are our needs. Now, I know there's and I think Theresa did a really good job earlier in our discussions. There's a lot more to infrastructure than that, and I think that's the challenge of small towns is thinking beyond just the core infrastructure needs of connectivity and water and sewer and stormwater. So.
I agree with LD. To me, infrastructure are those community elements that are needed to help that community be a great place to live and to work and to raise a family. And certainly the first thing that come to mind are clean water and then roads and bridges. But I do think it's broader than that. It's those elements also that are really critical and important to that community and their vision. Earlier this week, for example, I visited the city of DeWitt and helped them celebrate the grand opening of their Fieldstone senior living facility. And I'll tell you what, they have worked on that as a community for over 10 years. There was 200 people there to celebrate the grand opening because they decided in their community they wanted and needed a place for our elderly adults to age with grace. And so it can be water and sewer, it can be a library, it can be daycare, and it can be senior housing facilities too.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I would add that infrastructure are the shared things that a community, the features and the structures that everyone needs to thrive and be successful. And so in addition to, the typical things that we think of, I think it also definitely encompasses natural features, the places that people can go to for recreation, and also that help protect communities against flooding and other natural disasters. And then, of course, some of those other kind of social structures like our healthcare systems, childcare systems, and things like that. Those are all things that we need to be cognizant of when we're thinking about infrastructure and how to be supportive of communities and making sure that we have shared resources that people can rely on.
Definitely. Thank you all three for your answers on that one. With Iowa Ideas, I think the whole idea of it is obviously to talk about solutions and creativity that people are bringing to issues. But to get there, I want to start with talking about kind of the challenges and the issues themselves. And I think each of you, again, brings varying perspectives on this with your different areas of work. So from your personal experiences, what do you see as kind of the biggest standout challenges when it comes to smaller communities looking to improve those different areas of infrastructure that you just mentioned? And I know that's kind of a big question, can go dozens of ways, I'm sure, but I'd love to get your take on it. Maybe we go the reverse this time. Alicia, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. So one of the reports that I worked on last year was related to rural water systems. And I did a survey of rural water systems, trying to understand, the challenges that they face and the opportunities that they have. And one of the things that I really came to understand was the challenges facing small communities that are struggling with delivering safe drinking water to their residents. And I think that the biggest challenge there had to do with basically making the decisions about how do you continue to provide safe drinking water. Do you try to invest in upgrading your drinking water system? Do you try to consolidate or franchise with a rural water system? And people who are in these communities are not experts in everything. And so just not having the capacity to understand how to make those decisions or to have the resources to know what the options are. I think that those can be very challenging conversations happening in smaller communities that don't know where to turn to help get the expertise that they need to make those decisions and understand the financial repercussions. And I think, similarly, when thinking about other kinds of community amenities, knowing and having access to the support to be able to put those things to make them a reality, like different kinds of natural amenities, trails, parks, and things like that. Just capacity and having the staff and expertise to be able to make those decisions and find the support that they need.
Definitely. Next on my screen is Theresa, if you're ready to answer that question too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to continue to build on Alicia's comments because I think she's spot on. We always say at USDA, you're in a small town when they don't have a grant writer. And Iowa is filled with small towns. And to her point, oftentimes our hometowns, our rural communities don't have the capacity, they don't have the staff, they don't have the consultants to get started on solving or reaching their vision, whatever that might be. Oftentimes infrastructure projects, whether they're hospitals, large master planned parks, whether they're a water plan, they're complex. So you have to get enormous amounts of stakeholders involved, and you have to find multiple sources of funding. And you have to make sure that aligns with the community's vision on how they'd like to grow. And then you're always balancing the needs. How do we spend our resources on the needs? And then our wants, which is part of community resilience and vibrancy also. And so one of the things we did at USDA this last year was we kicked off something called our Equity Project, where we identified about 10 communities around the state that are disadvantaged, underserved for all kinds of reasons, and went out there and met with them one-on-one and went through a process of trying to understand their barriers to accessing USDA programs. And again, we have over 50 programs to support rural communities. And really what we found out was that lack of capacity was one of the largest stumbling blocks for them and the hurdles. And so, we're going to continue to try to introduce ourselves and make it easy for rural communities to access our resources. But I think collectively, whether you're a mayor, whether you're with the federal government, the state government, or a nonprofit, we also need to work together to introduce one another to those communities so that they can access all of the resources, whether it be technical assistance or financing or grants, to help that community succeed and get the infrastructure that they're looking for their community.
Definitely. And LD, I'm guessing you probably have some things to add to that as well.
Well, these two are perfectly on spot, but your biggest challenge is you're in a small town. I did take one class at UNI on how to be a mayor. And everybody's doing this all elected officials at low levels are basically glorified volunteers. And a lot of us don't have those expertise. You guys are correct. But the first challenge is I can be a mayor. I could be a staff member in a small town. I could want, but I don't have any capacity to move forward with it. It's council that makes that decision. So my first priority as a mayor and as staff is to educate and get my council together and moving forward on the planning steps. Everybody knows the road needs to be fixed. Everybody understands the stormwater management needs to be fixed because we have flooding issues. But until council makes that decision to move forward with the planning stages, that's step number one. You have to have council's approval. And once you do, then the first steps that we've been really working hard in Ely over the past couple of years is it's really hard to make decisions if you've not prioritized your projects and then move forward to get just some simple engineering done to know what you're up against. There's a big difference if that road costs $500,000 or $2 million to fix. And if nobody knows that answer, it's impossible to get the project started. So there's a lot of planning on the front end that you have to get council to commit to, because it's really hard to get the public engaged until you have answers to give them. And there's no reason to get the public engaged on the front end because they're really going to give you answers based on no facts. And that's not a good way to start. So I would say the biggest challenge to small communities is getting your council on board to start, having a directive plan in place, and then going to the public with your projects. So
definitely. Thank you all for that. And this next question I originally had directed just at Theresa, but actually I would like everyone to touch up upon it if they could, but maybe starting with Theresa. Obviously this conversation and a lot of cities around Iowa, we're not seeing population growth in a lot of small communities. And I think a lot of small communities aren't necessarily looking for that population growth either, but I think in all four corners of the state of Iowa, small communities are still looking to thrive even with the population that they currently have and the population that they can healthfully sustain or try to sustain. So I'm kind of wondering, Theresa, you first, just in your experience, what do you see in common with these successful smaller communities in Iowa, these communities that are able to thrive? What are, what's the, I'm not really asking for the secret formula, but, what are the pieces to have in place for a community to thrive in times where, a lot of communities in our state, are smaller communities especially, are losing population?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to start by saying, look, I think rural Iowa, rural America is a place everybody can call home, and making sure that we get the resources to those communities so everyone can call home, high-speed internet, for example, clean water. But if there's one element of the secret sauce that makes a great community, it's exactly what LD mentioned. It's the people. It's having folks that love their communities, that will get involved, participate on a steering committee, lead a visioning committee, and help build that roadmap and that plan for their community, whether it's the nuts and bolts of sewers and water systems, or whether it's the things that make their community special, an art trail, a walking bridge. Those elements are just as critical to a vibrant, strong community where people want to live, where they want to grow their businesses, where they want to raise their families. So it's the people. That's the secret sauce. And anything we can do to, lift people up, at least certainly at USDA, and support them on that journey of figuring out and how they're going to sustain their communities is something that, we're really interested in working hard to do.
Definitely. Does anyone want to piggyback off that too as well?
Well, I would just say from our perspective, what makes a thriving community is resident engagement. I think one of the things in our community, people love the proximity of being close to Cedar Rapids and Iowa City, but they don't want to live there. They want to come home to a smaller town where they're they feel a little more engaged, a little more connected. And let's be honest, in a small town, if you have a problem with something going on, you can get a hold of that mayor or that city administrator pretty quick and easy, and have a conversation where it's a little more complex in a larger community. And I think residents like that feeling that their voice is being heard, and that they can come home to a place that's a little bit slower paced than where they left when they were working. And I think they like that. So that's what I think makes communities thrive, is getting your residents engaged and heard, and it makes them want to contribute and make your community more vibrant.
I think LD's point, also one of the things I want to build on there, is that sometimes that engagement doesn't happen at a city council meeting. I bet LD gets just as much engagement at the cafe or the gas station.
That walking trail, man, I never get a full walk in with you.
That's right. And so we have formal processes, but it's those informal processes of engagement and community building and relationship building that are part of that fabric of a really strong community. One of the successes I have seen across the state, there are communities that have used community surveys, for example, to annually ask their residents, what's your priority? What's your priority? And then the city council tackles one of those priorities. And it may be improving a point, a park point to take advantage of a view, or to finish a section of trail. Again, not everything when it comes to infrastructure and community vitality hinges on a brand new water system, although those are important. Sometimes what makes community members feel engaged and special can be the smallest elements that just enrich that community vibrancy.
Definitely.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I I think there are a lot of different ways to define success, but I think, in my world, what I think of when I think of successful communities are the communities that invest in their natural resources and their natural amenities. So, thinking about small towns that have, trail systems that are bringing cyclists into their town and to have dinner have lunch, whatever, at their local cafes. Communities that have, walking trails, that have lakes and nice amenities at their beaches for their lakes. I think that those communities, St. Charles is a really good example of, Charles City, that has put in a whitewater feature on their downtown area that brings people from all over the state to try that out. So I think that those communities that are finding creative ways to utilize their natural resources, revive those areas, can really draw people in and improve the quality of life for their residents and make sure that they are economically viable.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And before I ask my next question, I wanted to remind everyone watching that if any of you have questions of your own, feel free to pop into the chat and submit those, and we'll ask those as we're going along instead of waiting till the end. So if you have questions throughout this and you want asked, just send them in and we'll get those asked for you. My next question for Alicia and Theresa especially, just kind of wondering, we were talking about kind of engagement with communities. Wondering how communities, maybe there are folks watching right now, kind of wondering how to get involved and make contact with each of your organizations. Kind of wondering what that community engagement looks like for you both in your organizations. And then, and LD, if you want to speak on the other side of that too, after them on what it looks like from the city's perspective, working with other organizations as well and connecting with them, that would be great too. But yeah, curious, Alicia and Theresa, what that community engagement looks like with those two organizations.
Yeah, we have really tried to get out more across the state and into local communities, trying to understand their different environmental concerns and trying to engage them on environmental issues and advocacy. And that's been something, we're a small organization, and so it's difficult for us to get out of our Des Moines bubble, but we try as much as possible. Just this last summer, we went up to Storm Lake to have a little lakeshore party to try to draw people in from the city to talk with them about how they view the lake, how they engage with it, and what they think that the city could be doing to make sure that that amenity is protected. And so, we try to do that. And then, of course, we have a lot of webinars and advocacy trainings to try to train people up on how to be advocates in their own communities and engage with decision makers at a very local level, and then also at a statewide policy level. So if you're interested in getting involved and getting some tips related to that, I'd encourage you to check us out at iaenvironment.org.
Thank you for that.
Well, Gage, at USDA Rural Development, all we do is focus on rural communities, and generally that's communities 20,000 population or under, which really covers the vast majority. I believe about 1.7 million Iowans fit into our definition of rural. Now, when people think of USDA, though, they think of farmers, they think of food nutrition, they think of natural resource. And all of those are critical programs and investments into our communities. But what we do is really work on three things: business programs and business development, community facilities, and housing related issues. And so we have a real focus on keeping our rural roots. Nobody wants to call a 202 number to talk to USDA. They want a local person. And so we have 10 offices around the state. We have a staff of about 60. And if you can reach out to any of our USDA staff, and maybe Gage, your team can put my email address in the chat. I'd be happy to hear from anyone and everyone. We'll get you connected with the local representatives that can help you sort out not only our 50 plus programs and how we can help you, but maybe some of our more national programs that you might be interested in, such as our Reconnect program, or some of our meat and poultry supply chain programs. But on a day-to-day basis, we're out there doing outreach. Again, just trying to make sure that our city administrators and our mayors and our councils and our county boards and our economic development chamber leaders know that we're here and that we've got loans and grants available to help them achieve whatever their vision is, or sometimes help them get that need accomplished. A new water system, a new stormwater system, a new wastewater system, or it can be investing in, a daycare. So many things that we do.
Definitely. Thank you for that. I did get confirmation that your email is in the chat now, Theresa. So
Thank you.
you're there. Ellie, did you have anything you wanted to add being on the other side of that? Otherwise, my next
I would,
question.
yeah, no, I would love to have a 1-800 help now number where I just called in and somebody automatically told me all the different options there. Cause I know there's a lot of programs. I know there's a lot of options out there, but sorry, I got an angry dog upstairs and hopefully that goes away quickly here.
That's okay. Can't really, I don't think.
Good. But what I'm hoping for is, like Theresa just said, just call us and just ask. Even if you don't know if it applies, at least call and ask. And if it doesn't, maybe they can at least direct you to somebody to help. And that's obviously the overwhelming issue. A lot of times we know there's a lot of programs out there. We know there's a lot of services, but if we've never used them before, we don't really know who and where to ask. And one of the great things for the Iowa League of Cities, they started up as a mayor's association. And I have one email that's just mayor@iowaleague.com or similar to that. And if I have a project we're working on that we're not familiar with, I can just send an email out. And a lot of times that networking, somebody else or some other town did have that project and they can direct me a little bit more on how to help out. So, and I think that's just finding your resources is one of the biggest challenges for a small town. So,
LD, at USDA, we've heard that feedback. And one of the things that we have kicked off, a pilot program around the country is called our Rural Partners Network.
Excuse me, I'm gonna go shut a door. I'll be right back.
It is a kind of your 1-800 help me now program where we are investing in some community development staff that not only are going to be working with anybody that reaches out on USDA programs, but to help them get connected to all the other federal programs, whether it's something through EPA or food nutrition or conservation services or forest service, any of our federal government programs, because you're right, it's just too complicated. And a Rural Partners Network, we think, is something that can help get those resources connected to the communities that need them.
And we similarly at the Iowa Environmental Council, with all of the new federal infrastructure dollars that are coming into our state, both with the IIJA and the IRA, we've started a kind of a warehouse website of all those different resources to try to explain the different programs, whether you're an individual or a business or a local government, trying to provide information and links to all of those different programs so you can easily get access to them. And we're building that out right now, and we're hopefully going to be launching it next week. So stay tuned for that, but it would be a great place for people to try to understand all of the different programs and the funding that is becoming available and is going to be heading into our state, because there's going to be a lot of resources out there to try to parse through.
Exactly. Just from the bipartisan infrastructure bill, I believe Iowa will be receiving about $5 billion. And that doesn't take into account the ARPA dollars, the American Rescue Plan dollars that have come into the state, and the Inflation Reduction Act dollars that will be coming to the state. So there's just a real commitment, certainly on behalf of the Biden administration, to get these dollars out to help rebuild and invest in what I like to call our hometowns, but rural America.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And LD, like I promised, this next question is just for you after missing you on the last one. But I was wondering, one, after the last question, kind of talking about how you guys in Ely kind of navigate connecting and finding resources is just an example, but also what other unique challenges do you think a city like Ely has, being smaller, but you guys are in a unique position being between, you know, kind of the Cedar Rapids and Iowa City areas. So you do have these larger Iowa communities right next to where you are.
Well, it's funny. We really get a pull both directions from our residents. Ely was about 500 people in the 90s, and now it's about 2,400 people. And probably within the next 5 to 7 years, we'll be knocking on 4,000. There's two pulling ideals from our residents. One is the minute I move in, I don't want it to get any bigger. We're done. I want to stay in a small town. And this is not meant as a knock at all, but we hear a lot of, we don't want to be the next North Liberty, which is a town that really blew up in size, and it was growing so fast. It didn't really have a ton of direction. Now they're doing an awesome job of bringing it all together. It was just overwhelming. And the other side is, boy, I wish we had more amenities, more businesses. You know, our town of 2,400 has one gas station. We have one bar/restaurant. We have no restaurant. We have so I think one of the challenges that we're actually doing a market study right now to use it as a tool to attract businesses. And we're working to develop land because that's a challenge. We have a lot of residents, but not a lot of services in our town because our average resident drives by a Hy-Vee, a Target, and a Walmart on the way home from work. So yes, they want a grocery store in our town, but that grocery store is not going to compete price-wise with a Hy-Vee. So the challenge is finding the right mix of businesses that will service our community, like a dentist office, like maybe an insurance agent, to move into our town, but yet convince them that they can stay viable in an area when you're that close to a larger community. And that is one of the challenges we have. It's a unique set of challenges because when I grew up in Kelowna, which was 20 miles away from Iowa City, we had all those things because you were far enough away. People didn't want to make the run into the big city to get their stuff. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And we actually have the opposite challenge of struggling to get businesses. Now with the new trail that's coming through our town, we're starting to attract businesses that are working off that trail, like Dan and Debbie's and things like that, the creamery. It's become a destination stop. And I think those are, as a city, we're working to put attractions into our town that not only will make, any business owner will tell you, only a certain percentage of their business comes from the residents. A lot of it comes from outside of your town. So as a city, your job is not to just bring in businesses for the residents, but also to bring clients in for the businesses that are in your town. So hopefully I didn't get off topic too much there.
No, definitely. Kind of touched upon a little bit of the pros and cons because I think Ely is, that's a pro, is it being situated between, you can kind of attract some of those. I know a lot of bicyclists end up down there and stuff like that. So
the word we use is controlled and managed and supported growth. So we want to grow as a community. We don't want to stop because we talked to a lot of other towns who are shrinking and the challenges they have, but we want to do it in a way that's planned out that best benefits our community as we grow. The right type of housing, the right type of mixture, the right type of businesses. So
absolutely. And my next question is kind of for everybody, given again your unique perspectives that you bring to this panel. But of course, since COVID-19 pandemic has started and is still going, we've seen larger influxes of federal and state funding that communities can access, including ARPA, of course. But obviously, I assume, based off my coverage and this issue, that sometimes it's harder for smaller communities to know how to access these types of federal and state programs due to not necessarily having positions fully dedicated to working on doing that. So I was wondering if all of you or a couple of you could speak to kind of how you either have experienced that personally, of course, or how you help these smaller communities navigate some of these funding programs that one, they for sure would like to take advantage of, assuming they know about it, but two, like I said, not being able to have potentially like a full-time staffer being able to handle those things.
I could jump into that first because we kind of first of all had it with the derecho. When the derecho hit,
yep,
there were some communities we know around us who tried to manage all of that work with FEMA on their own, and it was literally overwhelming. And then we found out from Hiawatha that we could hire an engineering firm to handle that for us. We hired MSA, and we actually could get that cost reimbursed from FEMA for having them handle it, which a lot of communities didn't know. They just didn't want to hire because they didn't want to spend the money. And in the long run, we made more money because they were experts at it and they were able to manage the project for us. And I think that's part of the whole networking thing, is making sure you don't get so lost in your small town that you live in that you don't have the connections around you to ask the questions of who, where, why, and how. And I would urge any elected official or any staff member to go to your conferences, to network with. We in Lynn County, the mayors get together once a month and we just spitball what's going on. And it's just a great way to bounce ideas off each other. And I would strongly recommend to really build your network and utilize that network to know where to access the right information. So.
Great advice, LD, really great advice. I think that, for community leaders, whether you're elected or whether you're, an informal community leader, you're the chair of the library board, or you're leading a stakeholder committee that wants to, add a wing onto the hospital, whatever that vision is, you can't be shy. and you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Reach out to others, go to those conferences, build that network, call USDA, pick our brains. You know, we are customer service oriented. We will tell you everything we know and try to get you in the right direction if we can't help you. And so that kind of tenacity, I think, is really, really important for our smallest communities. But it's important for all of our communities as we work to, build a community for our futures, build a community that has those elements of infrastructure that not only are needs-based, but also are wants-based, because together that's what makes a vibrant community.
Definitely.
And I'll just put in a plug for the nonprofit community.
Cool.
that we are all trying to understand all these different new programs and where all the new funding is going, and also try to be helpful and provide support and understanding for those folks that are looking for resources.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And Alicia, the next question is specifically for you.
In?
Oh yeah, go ahead, Theresa.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, you're okay.
I think it's important for folks to know that many of our USDA programs, nonprofits are eligible. So it's public entities and nonprofits that can take advantage of many of our programs. So, we've had grants that have gone out to Habitat for Humanity. We have dollars that have been available to food banks. We do a lot with public entities, but also with nonprofits. And so I encourage folks to, regardless of your entity, give a call.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. I think that is really important to point out as well. Alicia, like I said, this next question specifically for you. I know you've written about this in the past, talking about, of course, having strong infrastructure is a large part for placemaking in communities, but a huge part of that is also having good water quality, of course, and not just for drinking. But you've talked about it in the recreational aspect, just having good, clean water that people can, one, like I said, drink, two, be able to swim in. Obviously, that's been an issue in Iowa for years. And, every year we see dozens of beaches closed down in the summer due to poor water quality. I'm just kind of wondering if you could kind of speak to, of course, not only the drinking aspect, but water as a placemaking aspect of community infrastructure, and how important that is to especially certain communities, like you mentioned, Storm Lake. Obviously, water is a big part of their community.
Yeah. So, like I mentioned about communities that have been investing in their natural resources and natural amenities. I mean, a huge part of that, we can't talk about that without talking about water quality. You can build an amazing water feature and not have anyone want to use it because the water quality is too poor. So that has to be a part of the equation. And I think, the communities that have really tried to work upstream, take a watershed approach to water quality in their own community, and tried to protect their resources, are certainly have a leg up in some of these, in some ways. And so, implementing natural infrastructure projects like wetlands, stormwater wetlands, bioswales, reconnecting floodplains, those have benefits for, people as natural amenities, places for people to go and explore and hike around or bird watch, but they also do a good job of treating water quality and improving water quality and protecting that. So, I think it's really important for communities to be investing in natural infrastructure practices for all those various reasons. And certainly, we need to be having a larger conversation about water quality in our state because, I know for myself and a lot of my people in the millennial generation, we really want to have places to go and be outside and enjoy. And if there are other states like Minnesota who might be doing a little bit better job of that and might be having more outdoor recreation opportunities for people, then we might just go somewhere else. So I think it's something we really need to be having a serious conversation about. I know obviously water quality is a big topic of conversation in our state, but what are the solutions that are actually going to address it at the scope and scale that's necessary to actually improve water quality here? So that's something that can be done, at a community level within their local watersheds, but also we need to be thinking about it at a statewide level as we have conversations about workforce recruitment and retainment. Yeah, I think it's a huge part of placemaking is having those natural amenities, but then also having the water quality that's actually going to make it successful.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's going to, I think, touch upon a couple questions coming up here about how these really important, what I consider like the base layer things for infrastructure, the water quality being one of them, is kind of the base attraction point for economic development and keeping younger people in communities and not pushing them out in a way into Minnesota, for example, who obviously has done a lot of work with water quality over the years with all the lakes that they have. But we actually have an audience question, so I appreciate the participation here. A question from the audience, they said they were curious if any of the panelists have heard of or worked with Wellmark's Healthy Hometown Initiative or Iowa Healthiest State Initiative. Sorry, trying to scroll here. Both programs assist communities with planning and projects to improve quality of life / health, including infrastructure such as parks and rec, walkability, studies, etc. Does anyone want to take that one? It is related to recreation too, so it's going along with where we're at right now. So this is great.
Yeah, I think that we looked into one of those grants, but it's definitely about putting projects in on the ground. And that was something that we don't, we're a law and policy organization, so we don't really work on those directly. Sure. But yeah, that is a program that's available where you can get funds to put in parks and improve the local natural amenities.
Definitely. Anyone else?
I would say I say as a mayor, I'm aware of the programs. I know our recreational department has reached out and got some funding for different aspects that we've added to our parks. I don't know if it's directly related to that one, but it's just another prime example of, hey, there's more available funding out there if you just know the right resources.
Yeah, that's right. There are many resources out there. I'm certainly aware of those programs. And oftentimes what we see at USDA is that a community has taken that step, has participated in a program like the Healthiest State initiatives, and then they've identified their priorities. And that's when they can come to us and we can help them determine if they're eligible for one of our many, many programs to help them, implement and achieve that priority, that investment. These programs, like that Healthy State Initiative, they're wonderful. They really are an amazing resource to help communities, again, identify what their priorities are and where they want to invest, and to get the feedback from their residents as to what their vision is for the community.
Definitely, and that kind of brings up my next question, actually, when we talk about priorities. I'm kind of wondering, in y'all's experience, how do you see small communities prioritizing infrastructure projects? Of course, you only have so much population, which means your residential tax base probably isn't expanding, so you have to make sometimes probably tougher choices than larger communities have to make. Of course, with other means of funding, with programs and federal state allocations of funding. But I'm kind of wondering, in your experience, when it comes to kind of making those decisions, I'm guessing priority is mostly based on need, but I'm sure sometimes those timelines line up in a way that of multiple things are in need. So how do you decide what is needed most?
Well, I can tell you from my experience, when I started 7 years ago, we were a very reactionary town. We fixed the problem when it was right in front of us. We did not have much. If a developer came in and wanted to develop, we'd react to that development rather than having a plan in place on how we wanted to develop. So I'll be honest, from my perspective, I'm going to preach plan. Be prepared. So that way, when you do want to prioritize and move forward, you know what you're up against. And that with us started with updating our comp plan. Your comprehensive plan tells the city what you want to do and how you want to do it. And we are redoing ours right now, and we're getting community members involved in that process. And then develop a capital improvement plan with your council. And Theresa gave a great idea. A lot of people develop their capital improvement plan. Initially, I would recommend have your council put one together, have workshops with the community, develop it. After a year or two, as you start to work through it, then I would recommend engaging the community survey, because now it's starting to become a little bit of a well-oiled machine, and you can start to subtract and add as you go through it, and you get the community involved. It's really hard to get the community involved without giving them something to choose from. And then that's where you get the help with prioritizing the projects, and then when all that is done, involve hire your engineers, hire your financial planners to help you understand how you would pay for projects and exactly what you're up against, because that helps that capital improvement plan move around. So, and this is really boring stuff, but it has to happen. I mean it boring. These are long meetings that are not exciting, but there is no way to move forward if you don't know how much things cost, what you're up against, and then how your residents prioritize those. And sometimes residents might not see a sewer project as very important or exciting because they don't see the problem. They just drive over it. And so part of that is engaging the residents and helping them understand. Everybody wants a whole water treatment facility in our town because they see the yellow water. We have a heavy iron and hard water, and people sometimes fill their tub after we flush pipes and it feels yellow and it's gross. I agree. So that's an easy project to sell because people see the yellow water. They don't see the problem down at the wastewater treatment plant on a daily basis. So engaging your community, that's very important.
Absolutely. Anyone else on that one? Otherwise, I can go to the next one.
No, I think the mayor's right on. There will always be a tension between the resources and the dollars available, and not only the needs, but the wants of a community. And so that community engagement lays the base for the vision. And it can be adjusted. It's just a roadmap, but it does help a community prioritize. It also is a process that engages communities, stakeholders, and residents to get involved. I think councils learn a lot when they put themselves out there and listen to the community as they are making those tough decisions about where to spend local tax dollars, state tax dollars, and federal tax dollars, all in the effort to provide the infrastructure that the community desires.
Well, I just want to really quickly jump on what Theresa just said. It's right. That CIP plan, that plan is just a roadmap. And projects will move up depending on funding. Like we just found out with this, like you had brought up earlier, these funds coming into the states. Some of these projects may have up to 25 to 30 to 40% loan forgiveness for SRF loans. So all of a sudden, that $3 million project might have $1 million forgiveness on it, and that moves that project up a lot faster than some other projects because of that. Lack of better words, free money. I hate to call it free money because somebody's paying for it, but it's free money for my city to help make a project happen faster. So
definitely. And the next thing I want to touch upon is community engagement. But first, LD, I wanted to follow up with you on, as we were talking before this, and as I know from covering Lynn County myself, this is kind of a big week for a specific infrastructure project. You were talking about the water treatment plant. I was kind of wondering just if you could kind of speak directly to that, because I know for sure, just in Lynn County, you're not the only city in kind of the same boat of trying to navigate and get some ARPA funding for a really needed infrastructure project, but just kind of talking briefly on, the road to getting here and kind of what's at stake for you over this weekend.
Really quick background. The first big project we did was a 3-phase project. We redid the road through town, the main drag through town that everybody drives. And step 2 was redoing the water, we had a bunch of fingers. We tried to make a big loop for the water, so we had better water distribution in our community. The third step was updating sewer lines. We had some communities that had 2-inch service pipes. Now, you don't know what has to go through that line. 2 inches isn't much. So we had to upgrade our sewer line from when we engineered it right before COVID and to when we actually did the project starting this year. The increase went from 1.7 million to 2.7 million. So we had a $1 million increase due post-COVID just due to rising costs, et cetera. So we put that project, we applied towards the ARPA funding. Lynn County got about $26 million to hand out to everybody not named Cedar Rapids, Marion, or Hiawatha, basically to a large degree. And we were not included. We were told our project scored very well, but we were not included in the first round in June because in July because it just didn't fit right. So right now we're fighting hard. I think there was over 57 million in total asks, and they have about 13 million to hand out in this second round. And we're fighting hard to get our piece of the pie, for lack of better words. So, and nothing against the other people applying for it, but you have to fight for your city and do your best to, in my opinion, ARPA funding was designed to help offset COVID expenses. And that should be the highest priority of those funds. And other people will disagree with me a little bit because they did broaden the program as to who qualifies. And so there's a lot more asks out there that are a little different in mindset. So
yeah, I definitely just want to make sure we touched upon that as just the timing. This is such a
I probably got a little bit personal there because I've been working on it so hard.
for sure.
But the timing is big because we had to move forward with the project. We've already increased our sewer, our utility rates for our residents. They're already paying more money for it. What we're really hoping is that we will get a percentage of this back that we can then apply and reduce some of those rates. That's our ultimate goal, is that we'll be able to come back to our residents and say, hey, we were right. We were able to get some help and we were able to reduce your, and as a city, it's not just reducing that immediate cost, but it then increases our bonding capacity for more infrastructure projects down the road. If we don't get that $1 million, that's $1 million against the next project that we can no longer borrow. And that makes it a little harder, so.
Yeah, definitely. And actually I had one more question for Alicia before I ask everybody about community engagement, but and maybe Theresa could touch upon this too. I know you guys have various programs, of course. So of course, as we were talking about earlier, many smaller communities don't have, full-time positions in various city departments. So Alicia, for you, I'm kind of wondering how you bring about these issues of water quality work and environmentalism to the forefront of these communities when someone's job within that community might not have a job devoted to working with that. And I think historically people might see things surrounding environmentalism and green as maybe more expensive for a smaller community to be able to work on. Just kind of wondering how do you guys approach being able to implement these different programs or environmental work, water quality work in a way that makes it one, more feasible for smaller communities, and two, maybe not as overwhelming. I'm trying to see if overwhelming is the right word, but I'll just go with that. Maybe not as overwhelming for these smaller communities to take on, whether it is water quality or these recreational projects that are using Iowa's natural resources in a green way.
Yeah. Well, I think a huge part of it is just having a conversation and understanding the various concerns and trying to do a little bit of education about, the benefits that natural infrastructure projects can provide. And even though some of these things might seem expensive up front, in the long run, they can be very financially beneficial. And so implementing projects that are going to have long-term benefits that are not just, a short-term solution, but can help build resilience in communities and also have other, side benefits that maybe you hadn't thought of, like providing opportunities for people to get outside, natural beautification, things like that. I think it is difficult to have these conversations because obviously there are a lot of needs and there are capacity issues, but trying to understand the various perspectives and then providing insights as far as, this is actually feasible. And here's an example of where it has worked. Those can be really good tools to use to broach the conversation around natural infrastructure projects specifically. I think that communities are, really strapped and, just kind of putting things into perspective as far as, there are some alternative approaches that could be really beneficial for your community that are not, kind of the standard practice. It just takes some conversation and some time. And I think that those things are becoming more accepted as we have more kind of conversations like this, or, meetings between similar stakeholders that have experience with these different kinds of projects.
Definitely. Thank you for that.
Gage, at USDA, all of our programs have eligibility requirements, standards that help us determine the level of assistance that we can provide a community. So whether we're looking at their population or we're looking at the median household income. And so we can provide up to 100% loans. And in some cases, we do 100% grants. And oftentimes a community will qualify for, a 50% loan and a 50% grant. So depending on the eligibility requirements of that particular community, how we can assist them can change. That being said, the other thing that we do besides the loans and grants for the actual infrastructure is provide technical assistance. And so we have programs to provide placemaking, as you talked about, technical assistance, design technical assistance for our stormwater and water systems, and some business-related technical assistance programs too. And so, we've got, not everything's one size fit all, but we are focused, at least at USDA, on getting those resources to the communities that need it the most.
Definitely. Thank you for that. And like I promised, I wanted to ask something about community engagement. We have, I think, like a little less than 5 minutes here, so this might be my last question for all of you. I could personally ask enough questions about this topic to go for another hour, but I know people got to move on to other things. But I think one of the most important aspects of a successful community, and we've talked about it, is of course the people and residents being engaged and having that community buy-in to believe in the work that is being done in their own communities and to feel a part of that work. And without that enthusiastic participation from a variety of residents, communities, especially smaller communities, don't have as much to work with. Could each of you kind of speak to that aspect on how communities can take steps to achieve that community buy-in based on what you've seen in the past or even presently as you're doing your work today?
Well, tell them the project will raise taxes. That gets a lot of engagement. No. We struggle with that. We are one of the youngest communities in Lynn County. Where people move here because of our school district. And the challenge with that is young families have kids in a million activities now. They don't really have time to be as engaged in an in-person setting. So as a small town, we went out and got a OWL technology for our meetings. So we had better, more engaged online meetings. We're going to be doing, we're looking into a multi-use facility to build a new library and add a rec element to our town, because we don't have a school in our town. We're part of a larger school district, so we don't actually have a school in our building, so we don't have a gymnasium. And what we're doing is we're going to do a Q&A about the whole project, but we're going to be doing it online. So residents do not have to come into City Hall to be engaged. So what we're trying to do is diversify the way that our community can be engaged without going through the old standard of showing up to a council meeting or showing up to a workshop. We're offering online surveys. We're doing everything we can to engage our public and make it as easy for them to answer the questions we need answers to. So
definitely.
Yeah. Gage, communities are only as strong as their residents. And to the extent that residents want to be part of building their future and be part of identifying what that vision is, and then taking a leadership role. You don't have to run for mayor, although thank you, LD, for serving, and thank you to all the mayors and council folks out there who serve. Those are tough jobs, but you can play a small role. Most important, I think, for community engagement is find something you're passionate about and get involved in your community at that level. So again, it could be volunteering at the library. It could be helping with maintaining flower planters on Main Street. You don't have to do something big, but all of it adds up to a strong community engagement process where everybody plays a role, everybody celebrates the success, and everybody is part of building a really strong future.
Yeah, definitely.
I just really quick, I always tell our residents, the whole thought of, well, I pay my taxes, I do my part. No, that's the bare minimum. That's all of our bare minimums. If we're going to live in a smaller community, we have a lot more responsibility put on our shoulders to make our community great than you would in a bigger city. So because we have less people, less resources. So I really, Teresa's right. Find one thing you're passionate about, one thing that you're excited about, and just focus on that area. You don't have to do the other stuff. And that really helps to build a larger group of community engagement. And the kicker is you don't want to burn out your one small group of volunteers that always comes in. You want to continue finding new blood, new ideas, new ways of doing things. My favorite thing is when residents come up with to me when have an issue and complain about something, because then they're passionate about it. So now I need to turn that and make them engaged to improve that situation. So don't ask me to fix the problem. You become part of the solution. And funny, a lot less people are talking to me anymore. Because I immediately recruit them when they come to me with a problem. So
Definitely. Alicia, did you have any final thoughts with that as well? This last minute here?
Yeah, just really quickly that I think, there's always iterative processes with these things, and it needs to be kind of an ongoing conversation where you don't just do a plan once and then it's over. These things take time and continuous engagement. And I think that the communities that are really successful understand that and are taking steps to make sure that it's an ongoing process.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to thank all three of you for taking part in this panel, and I want to thank everyone watching for taking part and tuning in. Just want to say that this is obviously the end of this panel. If you want to join me at 3:15 for the update on broadband panel, though, that's another big issue in Iowa. I'm going to drop that information there and try to recruit some people to come sit down at 3:15. But otherwise, again, thank you to our panelists for joining in, and for everyone else, have a good rest of your Iowa Ideas Day 1.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Gage.
Yep. Bye.
Bye-bye.